start this with a cartoon. Does everybody see this? Dharma the cat?
Yes.
Yeah. The first thing we'll discuss is getting beyond words and concepts. Gee, where do I go from here? Good. End of discourse. Okay. Okay. All right, so we're going to be talking about the different schools and the different sects of Buddhism. Oops. So I think everybody is familiar with Theravada because that's really what we are, and the Mahayana. And then there is also Vajrayana. But this is how they all kind of came about, this chart here. We had the Buddha, and he was born in 563 BC, and he died in 480 BC. And a couple of years, 100 years later, Emperor Ashoka came along, and he promoted Buddhism in a very big kind of way. And up until that time, there was really only one type of Buddhism. That was what the Buddha taught. It really hadn't been watered down or changed, or there were still arhats, and things were still pretty much the way that the Buddha taught them. However, at the time of Ashoka, things started to change, and there was born the Theravada sect. Well, it wasn't really born. This is the original sect. This is the strict doctrine of the elders. This was the 4th century BC, and the places where it promulgated to were Southeast Asia, India, Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, all the places that you know about where the Theravadins are residing. Most of that is Vipassana and a few other types of Theravada. And then there came the Mahayana. The Mahayana means greater vehicle, but that's what they think. And they called Theravada the Hinayana, and it is a kind of a derogatory name. So we have a kind of a conflict between both of these sects. Oh, I'm better than you are, and you're not so good, and you're lower, and all of this. So, but the Mahayana said they had a list of things which you're going to go through maybe in another talk about what they disagreed with the Buddha on. They disagreed with the teachings, and they said that these types of things they would not agree with. For example, the biggest one was vegetarianism. They said that they must be vegetarian. They could not ever eat meat, and not associate with other Buddhist monks that ate meat. So you had two types there, the meat eaters and the non-meat eaters. But there were another number of things in Mahayana that they didn't agree with. Now, out of Mahayana, you have Tibetan Buddhism from the 7th century after Christ. And then there is the Pure Land coming out of Mahayana. That's really considered Mahayana directly. That is in Japan, China, and Korea. And then there's Chan, which is Chinese for the most part, and Zen, which tends to be Japanese. And then Nichiren, which is Japanese. And so all of these types of Mahayana came about. The original suttas started to kind of, they were still there. Mahayana considers the suttas very important, but they also came about with their own teachers writing their own suttas. And you've probably heard of the Jewel Sutta, the Lotus Sutta, Diamond Sutta. Those were not written, they were not spoken by the Buddha, but they were written by senior elder Mahayana monks. And Those are used very, very commonly today. So as I was saying, there's the Mahayana and the Hinayana. And that is the Mahayana and Theravada. Mahayana laid stress on the concept of the Bodhisattva, or one destined to be the Buddha, and also conceived of eternal Buddhas who resemble gods or deities. The Hinayana or Theravada regarded the Buddha as a man and had a doctrine, Theravada stressing the salvation of the individual. So basically, the Buddha was a person, a man, not a god. He suffered and he tried to figure out how to get out of it. And then he went and taught that method to everybody. There was nothing really that religious about it. It was simply, I found a technique, try it out, see if you like it, and this will relieve your suffering. And with the Mahayana, there were a lot of other things that came into play. The Pure Land, the land of the Arahats, the idea of everybody needed to be a bodhisattva instead of actually attaining nibbana. And there's, of course, argument about, well, no, that's not true, but they actually, it goes on and on about the bodhisattva. There's a lot of conflicts about what that really means. But the Buddha never taught anything about becoming bodhisattvas and not attaining nibbana in this lifetime. That's what he did. That's why he came. That's why he said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to spend 4 mahakapas and develop my virtue, and I'm going to attain nibbana so that you guys, and I'm going to teach it so you guys don't have to go through 4 mahakapas yourself. So please accept the teachings. Here they are. But many people these days say, no, we want to be bodhisattvas. We want to help everybody to be enlightened. And of course, that's a great ideal. But become enlightened yourself and then also help them too. So, the interaction of the Mahayana philosophy and Hinduism gave rise to Tantric Buddhism, or Vajrayana. Tibetan Buddhism is a very strange mix of the Hindu types of things like Om Mani Padme Om is a Hindu mantra. Of course, the Buddha never taught mantras. That would be a concentration type of meditation. The Tibetans they listen to what they call the oracle. The oracle is an individual who's a psychic, who's a shaman, and they go to him for predictions. Especially, and then of course they have reincarnation. They have the Dalai Lama, who is each Dalai Lama is, you're supposed to find them when the current one dies. Then there's a procedure where you go out into the villages and you find a small boy who is put through some tests and is shown to be, appears to be the next Dalai Lama because of his past lives and because of how he interacts with some like ceremonial objects and things like this. So there's a lot of different teachings, and I mean, there are a lot of psychic practices. Tibetans play musical instruments, which you're not going to find in Theravada. And there's just a lot of very strange things. And it's mixed in with the local culture of Tibet. So you have Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana as the 3 major sects of Buddhism, or we call it MTV. So how did Buddhism spread? Between 200 BC and 200 AD, Buddhism split into 2 branches, Theravada and Mahayana. And as you can see on the chart here, get this away. Of course, it started in India, um, and in Bodh and it spread down into Sri Lanka off the tip of southern India and went up into China, into Tibet, and this became Mahayana, and over into Japan. And Vietnam and Cambodia, I would say, is more Theravada. There's a lot of Theravada there. Vietnam is a strange mix of Mahayana, Theravada, and even other types of religions. I've been to all these places, and it's interesting to see what they do. Of course, Burma and Thailand are very much Theravada. You'll see the monks in the streets, on alms around there. In Laos, this is very Theravada here. So Buddhism spreads. What's the history? The Buddha's ideals were spread by his disciples throughout India. By 390 BCE, there were two distinct groups within Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana. 297 BCE, Buddhism became the state religion of a powerful empire in India. Missionaries sent all over Asia, and that's Ashoka. Between 320 and 600 CE, is after Christ, Vajrayana Buddhism developed in Tibet. The spread of Islam and the strengthening of Hinduism reduced the influence of Buddhism in India during the 11th and 15th centuries. There was quite a war during that time, and a lot of Buddhist monasteries were wiped out as the Mongols and the Muslims were pushing across the entire area. And you can go and see that these days. You can go to the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and you can see how during the 11th century the Muslims came through and wiped out a lot of places there, and the guides will explain to you all the history that goes through there. Plus in Burma, you see how it all went through into Burma. And Buddhism continued to thrive in other countries. For example, Western Buddhism. That's what we're in. This is what you call American Buddhism. How is it spread out in America or Canada, as the case may be, Western Europe? We're over here in the Theravada section, the South Asian schools. Of course, Suttavada is not listed in this chart, but we should be. The Bhavana Society, which is in North Carolina. There's forest traditions. There's Vipassana, which is Spirit Rock, and Insight Meditation Society. All of these places, they teach a style of mindfulness or Vipassana, using mostly the breath. Mahasisayadaw, and then there's, of course, the Goenkaji methods. And that's not really shown here. I think they kind of forgot that, unless that's part of the South Asian schools. And then there's many types of mindfulness types of practices, and there's becoming more and more of them every day. And there's more and more apps with all kinds of different versions of these types of mindfulness. The Mahayana East Asian schools, they spread out into Nichiren. There's the Soka Gakkai. I don't know that one. The Nichiren, I think, is the one where you chant for things that you want. I remember my brother in high school, he was doing that one, and I was off doing hypnosis. So the Pure Land schools, Shin Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, and Vajrayana. You have the Nyingma, the Kagyu, Sakya, the Gelugpa. I think the Dalai Lama is the Gelugpa, the Bon. That's the religion that was in Tibet, the Bon religion, that got mixed into Buddhism. Shambhala. There's the Dharma realm. So there's many, many types of things that have all come over to North America and permeated through the culture. If you look at what the percentages are, you have Mahayana at 56%, China, Japan, Korea split off from Theravada 2,000 years ago. Theravada is 38%, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand. It's the oldest branch. It's the way of the elders. The monks they follow a lot more rules in the Theravada. It depends, though. Some Mahayana follow many, many rules as well. Tibetan is only about 6% in Tibet and Mongolia. But I must say in America, I think there's a lot of Tibetans. Pie chart. And Suttavada, I added on here at 0.000001%. So I don't know. I have no data, but made that number up. And I just wanted to put a chart on here of the Islam religion. If you think Buddhism has a lot of different sects in it, well, Islam has a lot of different ones too. And everybody's heard of Sunni and Shia. There's evidently a third one coming off of the top, the major one, Khawaji. And then there's so many different types below this. It was an interesting thing. And then there's Sufi, which I think I always liked because of the dancing and the kind of cosmic dances that they did. And there are meditations, and there are the poets of the Sufis always had really great texts, really great poems. Okay, so that's the major types of Buddhism, MTV, if you will. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the suttas. What is the structure of the suttas, and what are all those books? There's a lot of books. So we call it the three baskets, the Tipitaka. Pitaka is basket, T is 3. And do would be 2, and let's see, it doesn't matter, right? It's Tipitaka. So what is the Tipitaka? It is the Vinaya. This is the discipline. This is the rules of the discipline. It's about seven books. And the discipline is every time somebody went to the Buddha and somebody had done something basically kind of dumb, they said, what are we going to do about this? And the Buddha would lay down a rule. He'd say, based on that, you can't do that anymore. And then that became the Vinaya. And the Vinaya is the stories of all of those occurrences where monks did foolish things and the Buddha had to make a rule. At first, there were no rules. And for a long time, the initial monks, they just knew what morality was, and they knew what to do. But gradually, as more and more people came in, they had to be trained in what was right and what was wrong. They just didn't know what that was. And most of the rules are pretty common sense, but there are many rules about how big your hut can be and how much food you can have in your mouth. And there's a lot of little tiny rules. So that's the Vinaya. Now, not a lot of people have read much of the Vinaya. We do have it. I've read the whole thing, and it's really actually very interesting because there are a lot of interesting stories in it. And the last part of the Vinaya, the 7th book, is actually for lawyers, Buddhist lawyers. And there are monks who they excel at figuring out what the rules are and how to apply them, because there are a lot of gray areas. And so you have to go to a judge, basically, or a senior monk who knows what the Vinaya is. And you have to have him say whether they have broken the rule or they have not. And once you get that determination, then you go into a penance mode, and you have to find out what you're going to do to allay that breaking of the rule. the worst rules, there's 4 of the top rules, you get thrown out of the order and you're never allowed back. And then there is the next 20 rules, and those are Sangha Dasesa. Those rules have to be decided by monks whether you're going to be thrown out or what kind of penance you're going to do. They're pretty major breaks of the rules. And then it just goes on to lower and lower sets of rules, like, Bhante has 277 rules that he follows. Nuns follow, I think it's 312. So a lot of those rules are very small ones, and they can be allayed by just doing some forgiveness to a group of monks. Every month, monks get together and they do forgiveness for people who have broken rules. They say, I've broken these rules, and the group forgives them, and they ask forgiveness. So forgiveness is in Buddhism, especially where you break rules. So that's the Vinaya, the discipline, books of the discipline. And then we have the suttas, which we know what the suttas are. It's what we're reading. And they've put in the Abhidhamma, and I have my not so smiley face about that. So what is the Tipitaka? Tipitaka in Pali means 3 baskets, not in the sense of function of storing, but of handing down. Just like workers carry earth with the aid of baskets, handed on from worker to worker, posted in a long line from point of removal to point of deposit, so the baskets of teachings are handed down over centuries from teacher to pupil. The 3 baskets are basket of discipline, the Vinaya Pitaka, which deals mainly with the rules and regulations of the order of monks and nuns, baskets of discourses, the Sutta Pitaka, which contains the discourses delivered by the Buddha to individuals or assemblies of different ranks in the course of his ministry, and baskets of the ultimate things, the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which consists of the 4 ultimate things: mind, mental factors, cetasikas, matter, rupa, and nibbana. And these are basically monks' ideas of how the mind works. And there is quite we don't believe that the Buddha actually taught Abhidhamma, that it came about probably around about 300 years after the Buddha was around, because it appeared in the 3rd council, and it didn't exist in the 1st or the 2nd council when they met to decide things. But it just kind of appeared around Ashoka's time. And so the question would be, well, where was it before that? So we kind of ignore that one. And just to say more about Abhidhamma, it's very interesting to read it, and there's a lot of things about the mind that are probably right, but some of them are probably not so right, because the people doing this, they weren't meditating that much. They were more thinking about things, and they were more interested in in theories about how the mind worked. Once you know how the mind works, you don't really think about all of this anymore. You just you understand how it happens. It's like a mechanic who doesn't know how to take an engine apart and put it back together. He might look at the engine and go, I wonder if this is how it works. And then they have theories about how it works. But if you have a real mechanic come in, who's taken an engine completely apart and put it all the way back together again, he has no doubt about how it works. And he doesn't have any theories about it. He just simply knows how it works. Okay. I think let's see if I need to hide a part here. So let's see. Oh, there it is. Hide floating panel. Okay. Okay, so the Vinaya consists of 1,511 pages, and it consists of the Mahavagga and the Chulavagga. and that is the larger, the greater chapters, sections, and the shorter sections. As usual, a very strange name for sections of books, but that's what it is, the shorter and the greater. And then there is the Sutta Vibhanga and the Parajikara. I'm not going to get into what all that stuff is. I'm just going to go ahead to the sutta. Just for purpose of understanding the Vinaya, it's basically it's all the rules and all the stories about those rules. Sutta Pitaka. So that consists of the Digha Nikaya, which is 900 pages, the Majjhima Nikaya, which is 1,092 pages, the Samyutta Nikaya, 1,686 pages, the Anguttara Nikaya, 1,840 pages, and the Khuddaka Nikaya. And this is a bunch of different books. I think you're all familiar with the Digha, the Majjhima, the Samyutta, and Anguttara, but the Khuddaka Nikaya is not just one book. As you can see, it's a bunch of different books. It's a collection. It is a true basket of books. The Khuddaka, the Dhammapada, Udana, Ittivitaka, Sutta Nipata, Vimanavatu. So some of these, I can tell you, of course, we know what the Dhammapada is, a bunch of sayings. The Udana is some sayings of arhats. Ittivitaka, I think, is that the nuns? Sutta Nipata, that is a very large book. Bhikkhu Bodhi just translated that one. Vimanavatu is the heavenly realms. It talks about the celestial realms. The Petavatu talks about the hell realms and Petas. Taragatas, that's the elders. Taragata, which is the female elders. Jataka, tales, which is the birth stories of the Buddha. Then Nedessa, I'm not sure what that one is. These other ones, I'm not sure what those are. There's one here that is the, it's not here. Well, maybe it's the Buddhava, but it lists all of the prior Buddhas for back to 92 eons, I believe. But it's many of all of the Buddhas in the past and stories about them and how they became the Buddha and what they did to become the Buddha and what kinds of Buddhas they were. That's one book by itself. And then the Abhidhamma is the Dhammasangani, the Vibhanga, and all the rest of these books here. That's 2,600 pages. So the suttas at 8,600 pages is the largest part of the Tipitaka. Okay, well, I guess I did put in some things about the Vinaya here. Okay, so these are the rules laid down, and here are the books. The major offenses, the Parajika, including explanation of how each rule was promulgated and listing special cases and exceptions. Then there is the minor offenses, the Pachitaya, including explanations and exceptions. And then the great section, or the Mahavaga, giving rules for admission into the Sangha, the ordination, dress code, residence, and rules for performance of special monastic activities. And then the shorter, the Chulavaga, the smaller section dealing with the treatment, offenses, and duties of teachers and novices with special rules for nuns. The epitome of the Vinaya Pitaka, the Parivikara, containing commentary primarily on the great section and stories about the events following the Buddha's enlightenment. Explains the rules by telling you the stories about how they arose. So you have the major offenses, the minor offenses, the great section, smaller section, and commentary. And the Parajika, for which you are, if you do anything anything as the four, or, having to do with the four parajikas, and you're thrown out of the order, you're never allowed back in. So these are things that you definitely don't want to do. And that involves anything to do with killing, anything to do with lying. And the lying happens to if you lie about your attainments. If you lie that you say somebody, I'm an arhat, and you really know that you're not, then that's a parajika. And it's considered very serious, because if you're found out, then everybody loses confidence in the monks that are teaching, because they're all lying. That's not so good. But you can actually tell somebody that you're an arhat if you are an arhat, and that's not a break of the rule. But I don't think an arhat would do that. Sexual intercourse is a parajika. Don't recall the other. I think it has to do with killing. Oh, yeah. Taking other people's lives. I can't remember the exact part of that. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, the Tipitaka contains the discourses delivered by the Buddha on various occasions, as well as some discourse delivered by his disciples, like Sariputta, Mahamoggallana. It is divided into 5 collections, or nikayas. The collection of the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya, 34 discourses divided into 3 sections, dealing with the training of the disciple. And the Majjhima Nikaya, which is a collection of the medium-length discourses. There's 152 discourses, many of which tell the Buddha's austerities, enlightenment, and early teachings. There is the Samyutta Nikaya. This is the collection of connected discourses. These are divided according to subject matter into 5 divisions. And these really are the shorter suttas. They're just a lot of, even like 5 lines, up to maybe a page or 2. Then there is the Anguttara Nikaya, collection of discourses from the gradual sayings. And this is 9,557 short discourses in 11 divisions, beginning with discourses on 1 subject in the first division, 2 subjects in the second division, and moving up to discourses containing 11 subjects in the last division. The name Anguttara means increasing by 1 item. And the Anguttara Nikaya is simply the book of the ones, book of the 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, and the 11s. So it'll be a list of 11 things, or there'll be 4 different things. There's if you'll find in the Book of 4s, the 4 right efforts. The Buddha says there are 4 right efforts, and what are the 4? And he'll go on to explain that. And that would be something that would be in the gradual sayings, or the Anguttara Nikaya. And then next, Khuddaka Nikaya. So these are all the books in the Khuddaka Nikaya. The shorter passages, the Path of Dhamma, the exclamations, the Udana, Itivutaka, thus saids, Sutta Nipata, it's a sutta collection, stories of the celestial mansions, the Petavatu, the stories of the hungry ghosts, the Therigatha, elder monks, elder nuns, and the Jataka, which is the birth stories, the Nideso expositions, Patisambhidhamagga, path of discrimination. Then there's stories, the Buddha Vamsa, history of the Buddhas, basket of conduct. And then there are two more that are only in the Burmese Tipitaka, probably not translated. And then there's also the Milinda Panha, which is the questions of Milinda, which some people may have read. So Abhidhamma added later. Was this really part of the original teachings? Abhidhamma Pitaka, or basket of ultimate things. The Abhidhamma was incorporated as his 3rd basket during the 3rd council held in the 3rd century BC. It deals with the higher philosophy of the Buddha and contains these 7 books. Enumeration of phenomena, Dhammasangani, the Book of Analysis, the Vibhanga, the Treatise on the Elements, Dhatukata, Book of Human Types, Pugala Panyati. This is very interesting, Book of Human Types. We're all a certain type in Buddhism. We're either anger characters, lust characters, or ignorance characters. And you can go through and find out like what you can kind of identify yourself with by your actions. For example, there's if a monk is sweeping, if a monk sweeps really fast to get it all done quickly, but he doesn't do a great job, but he still does a relatively decent job and he gets it done fast, he's an anger character because he doesn't like what he's doing. His overall mode of conduct is in anger. And if a monk sweeps it very perfectly and carefully and takes his time and gets up every leaf and it just looks perfect at the end of it and he's smiling and happy while he's doing it, he's a lust character, essential desires, and he's driven by greed and essential, and to make things nice. Everything has to be nice, and he enjoys everything. And then there's the ignorance character, and this monk sweeps everything, and he just sweeps it all over the place and doesn't really get anything swept at all. And this is a character that thinks a lot, that has a lot of analysis and a lot of thinking. They would rather think than meditate. The anger character has a lot of problems with sitting because they don't want to sit, they want to go somewhere. The lust type wants to go somewhere because he wants to go obtain things. He enjoys things. But the positive side of the anger character is that he's very smart. He has the intellectual side because he's very skeptical of everything. And so everything has to be proven to him. The sensual type is very nice because they always are surrounded by nice things. They're nice people and they're, but maybe not so deep. The ignorance character is very good with analysis and can think things out. Anyway, Book of Pairs, conditional relation. You've heard of conditional relations, of Patana. This gets into the mental states, the Vibhanga, all of the way that Nibbana arises and all of these things, which may not be the actual way that it works. But there's so many theories about it. Since this came after the Buddha was alive, it is held as a questionable part of the Buddha's teachings. And this isn't just us. This is a lot of scholars because they can't find any indication it did exist when the Buddha was alive. Many of its teachings do not correlate with the earlier sutta teachings. And so some of it doesn't match the suttas. So that's a problem. So the question with the suttas and all of this is how to approach studying it. Bhante's talked about this a little bit. He likes the system of just opening a book and start reading the sutta from there. And just perhaps when you open it, your intuition says what you need to read. I tried that. I guess I kept opening to the same sutta and that just wasn't working for me. So I said, I'm going to read this thing from the beginning to the end. And what I said to myself was, I'm going to take the Majjhima Nikaya and I'm going to read one sutta a day minimum. And in 152 days, I'll be done. And I'll have read all of it. Now, I may not remember most of it, but at least it'll be there. And I've done it a couple times and I've read all of the suttas. And the Samyutta at 2,000 pages is probably the most difficult to think that you're going to get through it. But you will. And I've been through it twice. And it's actually very, very interesting. It puts everything into sections, like dependent origination. There's an entire section on suttas about dependent origination. And you read this stuff over and over and over again. And it pounds itself into your brain because many things we don't believe. We don't believe that there's no self. No, there's a self. For sure there's a self. We don't believe that craving's a problem. We don't believe, we really don't believe deep down that many of these things are a problem, that everything's fine. But when you read through, you realize some of our beliefs really aren't right. And there will be a time when you read for the 2000th time that things arise and pass away, and you actually go, wow, they do. And finally you get it. So that the benefit of the suttas is you read it and that knowledge gets into you. And when you meditate, that comes up, and it gets into the deeper part of your mind, and it will come up when you need it. Majjhima Nikaya. So what to read first? The Majjhima Nikaya, that's Bhante's Bible. That to him, that's where all of the teachings lie for beginners and advanced meditators. It's all there. If there's only one book you need, it's the Majjhima Nikaya. And then but of course there's other books. So you can take a look at the Samyutta Nikaya, which has many support texts. Bhante uses that to support the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya. And there's many, so you can take your pick from the Dhammapada to the Jataka tales, from the hell realm stories to the heavenly realm stories. It's all pretty interesting. So this is kind of things to consider while how to read all this. And here they all are. This is a picture of the entire set of books for the suttas. These are the older books, these red ones right here. I'm not even sure I've seen that color before, but these, I have a lot of these, a lot of those. Must be Jataka tales. Anyway, that's the